Hello and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be ranking all of my eyeshadow palettes. These are my kind of first thought, gut feeling kind of rankings. I don't want to think about it too much because then I think you start really picking them apart and like thinking about them on the individual level, whereas I'm trying to think about them in terms of compared to each other. So if you enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I want to say that I love all of my eyeshadow palettes. I think that they are all great. It's just that obviously something's got to come last, and it just happens to be my Naked 3. This palette is coming in at number 12. So I really like the Naked formula and I've got more coming up in the rankings, but it is the colour story that is the reason that it's at the bottom of my rankings. When I first got this palette, these shades were all I'd wear. Just a light shiny pink all over the lid was what I went for, but nowadays it's just not the sort of colours that I like. I like more bronzy, warm tone, orangey kind of shades, so they're just not my shades anymore. I'm still glad I have it and I'm going to keep it around because if I ever do want colours like this, then this palette is great. And you can tell it does have quite a bit of wear in some of the shades, but it is coming in at last just because of the colour story. When I sit down, I don't think, oh yeah, I really want to use my Naked 3. It's more of a, oh, I haven't used my Naked 3 in a while, I should probably use that. This palette is coming in at number 11. Next is actually the palette that I've got in my 1 month, 1 palette challenge at the moment, and I didn't think it would rank this low in my collection, but it's just mattes really. There are 3 shimmer shades, but they're not very shimmery even. They're kind of more of a satiny formula. So I'm a shimmer girl and that's what I really like in an eyeshadow. So for me, they just aren't what I want on an everyday basis. It's really useful and I really do enjoy being able to, you know, build up a really nice crease and transition, but then there's nothing to put all over the lid. So that's why it's ranking so low, is because as you can see, this is the shade that I've gone for most, but even that is not, once it's on the eye, it's just not as shimmery as most other metallics because it is more of a satin formula. So that's why this is ranking so low. Next up is unfortunately another Morphe palette, and this palette is coming in at number 10. And it's not to do with the quality that any of these are coming in so low. It's definitely more the colour stories that are making all of these rank so low on the list. But I feel like with Morphe, I don't think about it as much before I make a purchase because it is cheaper. So coming in next is the 9T, which looks like this. This is another gorgeous palette, but it has the same issue as the palette I just showed, but the opposite issue. So it's got lots of lovely mattes to build up a great neutral look, but then all 3 of these shimmer shades are just too dark. So that's the lightest shimmer shade there is in this palette, and it really is quite dark still. If I was to swatch it next to this gold shade, you can see just how not shiny in comparison that shade is, but also you can see how much darker all 3 of these are compared to this. So that's why this palette is ranking in next, is because again there's just nothing, I don't feel like I can make a complete look. It's really nice to have in case I do then want to reach for, you know, any of these matte shades, but I could probably just do with having one of these Morphe palettes because they serve the same purpose in my collection of just reaching for another matte colour. Unfortunately for Morphe, it's a my final Morphe palette, but it is number 9, so you've got to remember I don't have that many palettes, so it's still in the top 10. But this is the 9D, and this is what it looks like. It is a gorgeous palette, and this one does actually have a lighter shimmery colour that I've been wishing for with the last two. But the issue with this palette is I feel like it is a one-trick pony, but I feel like that's more to do with the looks that I'm coming for, because I come for this when I want warm, these 3 warm shades to make a sort of sunsetty eye. And although it does have these gorgeous neutral tones, I got these two at the same time, so when I was wanting a more neutral look, I come to this palette, and when I want the warm orangey looks, I come to this palette. So I feel like that is hindering the rankings of this palette. And in addition, I got this in lockdown, so I haven't really had the chance to wear it that much. But yeah, so this palette is coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8 is my Pan That palette for the year of 2021. So this is my MAC Warm Neutrals palette. It is a gorgeous palette, and if you want to hear more of my thoughts on this palette, I will link my introduction to my Pan That palette series, because I go through in depth all of my thoughts on this palette. I think it is a really nice palette, and you can get a range of looks. There's more pinky warm tones and then a range of different browny golden neutral tones as well. And it just isn't one of my favourite palettes, so that is why it's ranking at number 8. This palette is coming in at number 7. It's the Naked Cherry. This one was actually probably the most surprising for myself, that it's ranking so low, as I thought it would be a lot higher, but it just feels like that because I'm counting backwards, whereas when you count from the front it doesn't feel that bad. This is a gorgeous palette. It's got a lot of warm berry tones in it, and I mainly wore this when I'd go out in the evenings, but recently I've been dipping into more this end on a daily basis, and I really like the soft pinky looks that you can create. I feel like the pinks in here are just slightly more warm than the ones in the Naked 3, and so they just are a bit more up my alley. So when I'm going for a pink, I kind of tend to go for this palette now. And the reason why it hasn't ranked higher is because these deep berry pink tones just aren't my favourite tones to wear anymore. So that's why it's not ranking higher. The palette that is just missing out on the top 5 is my original Naked palette. I really love this palette. I think that it was great, and I feel like I'm definitely still stuck in the early 2010s where everyone loved shimmers more than mattes, because for me having these 2 mattes is more than enough to create a look. Yes, I probably would have liked Dark Horse to be a darker brown shade and to not have these 2 in it, because to me they are absolutely pointless, but I feel like most eyeshadow palettes have shades that I'm not that interested in. But I feel like I've got my staple look. So I don't know if you can tell, but Sidecar has a massive dip in it along the whole way of it, and it is very worn down, because that was my everyday, just slap it all over the lid and blend into the crease shade with a bit of Naked. I loved wearing these 2 together and these 2 together, and I feel like that's why it's ranked so high up, is because I know the looks that I like that come from this palette, and there are multiple of them, so it's easy for me to go, yeah, I really like this palette. Something that is really interesting is that all of the palettes that are left I have bought in the last year, so it really is showing to me that I am buying palettes that I like, and I don't know if that is because of the novelty, but I feel like it is showing in the rankings that I've made good purchasing decisions. So coming in at number 5 is my Tati Beauty Volume 1 palette. I think this is a gorgeous palette, and it really does have a range of shadows in here. I really don't go into the Poet column, because when I want a more berry toned look, I tend to go for my Naked Cherry palette. But I really like the pink glitter in this row, so that's actually probably the most used shadow out of this row for me. The Memory row was a row that I thought I'd never really used, but I had a silvery dress last year for a formal, so I managed to create a gorgeous look using this row and the Aura row, because I couldn't do anything warm toned at all. And then these four in the middle are really just great everyday shades for me. I recently found out that the shades are actually just magnetised in, so they actually can pop out. I think will be a great addition, because these are great staple mattes. I really enjoy the sequin formula. I love that look, just every day on the eye, blended up. It is gorgeous, but that is the only kind of sequiny shade that I use, because it has to be a lid shade for the glitters to even show up. So I feel like I will use these other ones up in just using them as a matte, which then feels redundant, as, you know, then I've got two rows basically of mattes. But if I can pop them out and use them as singles, that means that I'm going to get more use out of them. The only thing for me that is kind of meh about this palette is the metallics. So I tend to use this palette when I'm going to be using the glitters, so for that reason I don't tend to wear it as much, or I tend to use the mattes to build up a gorgeous warm toned brown crease and then add another metallic on. But yeah, I'm really surprised, as I don't love this palette as much as I thought I would when I bought it, which is why I think it's coming in at the lowest out of my new palettes, but I still definitely think it was a great addition to my collection. Coming in at number 4 is my new Colourpop Mandalorian palette. I love this palette, and I think it is really filling the itch that I had for green shadows, but it still has a lot of neutral shades. Like, it's only really this kind of quad that is more green. I feel like this palette might rank lower in the future once I'm over my green phase, but for now it has definitely got a solid spot at number 4. Coming in at number 3 is my Naked Honey palette. This is a great palette for me for just, you know, warm goldeny tones every day, which is really what I'm leaning to at the moment. I love all of the shades in here. I definitely think it is the best Naked palette, and I'm so glad I picked it up. When they first released it, I wasn't interested in it at all, because I'd got the Naked Cherry pretty much as soon as they'd released it. So I wasn't dying to get it, as I think it came out the year after. But I heard so many people talk about how it's the best Naked palette on the market, and that made me really want to purchase it, and I'm so glad that I did. And I think you're gonna find that the next palette is quite similar to this palette, but they definitely are two of my favourites. And coming in at number 2 is my Natasha Denona Bronze palette. I love this palette and think it is gorgeous. It has perfect warm toned neutrals for every day, and I can create a look combining any of these shadows, as they all go together so well, which is mainly because they all are quite repetitive shades. But I really do love this palette, and the more I use it, the more I fall in love with it. I didn't think that I'd like a red metallic-y shade, but my most favourite recent look that I did was from this palette, using these two shades and then having a lighter, I think it was silk, on the centre, and I really love it. I think Bliss is a gorgeous, unique, individual shade. It's just a pink with gold reflex in it. You can't really see the gold reflex, I don't think, in the camera. It looks gorgeous on the eye, and just all of her metallics, they just feel so nice to the touch, and they just are so shiny on the eye. You can tell I've got a colour scheme that I'm really enjoying at the moment, but I really like this palette, and I'm so glad I picked it up. and it is my second favourite palette. Now, I was shocked that this became my favourite eyeshadow palette. Obviously, whenever you're buying a palette, you know you're going to be really excited by it, but I more wanted to try this formula, and I thought this would be the palette from this brand that I thought I'd enjoy the most. So I was surprised actually by how much I loved the majority of the shades. So it is the Jackie Aina Anastasia Beverly Hills palette, and it is gorgeous packaging. When I first bought this palette, I really thought that, you know, it was kind of half the palette I wasn't going to use, half I really was going to enjoy. But I love all of the shades in here. And my favourite eyeshadow at the moment is Sponsored. I think it is just absolutely gorgeous green brown shade, and I'm so scared that I'm going to completely use it up. So please let me know if you have any recommendations of a single shadow that is similar to this, because I absolutely love this shade, but I'm so scared that I'm going to run out of it that I don't want to use it if I'm not going to be going somewhere where people will see it. I really love all of the looks that I create with this palette, and I feel like, again, this red shimmer was something I really wasn't expecting to enjoy, but I really do enjoy it. I created a similar halo eye effect with this palette, with Ginger in my crease, Wigglies kind of on the outer parts of my lid, and then Zam and Soleil on the centre of my lid, and it was gorgeous, and I just really love this palette, especially because it has some bright colours in here in an everyday palette. So I'm way more likely to actually use these colours on an everyday, because I will open this palette and look at it and go, oh, actually maybe I will go for one of these shades. I'd say the only two shades that I really probably, you know, in my perfect palette they wouldn't be here is Shookington and Bigwig. I do have to say that it was a close one between these two palettes. I think that the reason why this palette, the Anastasia palette, outdid the Natasha Nona bronze palette is because I can create more versatile looks. This palette does come out with, you know, you either go the more reddy route, the pinky bliss colour, or it's a goldy bronzy colour, whereas I can create so much with this colour story, and they are only one shade different, although this palette looks a lot bigger. So I think it's impressive with how much variety you can get from this palette. However, I will say that I'm not very confident in just blending out Ginger. I do prefer to go in with, I tend to go in with Beach actually before Ginger, just so that I've got something to blend it closer into. But that is also because I don't set my eyeshadow primer, so maybe that's something I should consider doing. But if I don't want to reach into another eyeshadow palette and I know I'm going to be using this palette, then I will just put my bronzer in my crease just to help blend out this shade if I'm going up this end. And obviously if I'm going up more the pinky route, Supreme blends out really nicely. I thought I would end the video with a little winners podium. So we've got first place, second place, third place. Maybe I should level them out. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. I feel like I didn't really give that many reasons for why I preferred one palette over the other. It was just kind of my gut instincts, and I kind of knew instantly which palettes were going to be towards the top end, and then it was kind of more arranging them within their area. I feel like if I had more palettes, this challenge would become so much harder. But I feel like I've got a good selection. I know what I use and what I don't use, and what I kind of have to say to myself, no, Evie, you've got to use all your eyeshadow palettes, use this palette. And when I do that, I really do enjoy the looks that I create, and I do enjoy all of the eyeshadow palettes I have. But these three are definitely the three which, when I'm thinking about, oh, I'm really excited to do a look using, it's probably one of these three, or really any towards the top end of my eyeshadow palettes. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. If you have any suggestions of videos you want to see me do in the future, please leave them in the comments down below. And if you have any of these palettes, or you have a couple of these palettes, please let me know what your ranking would have been, your top 3 out of my eyeshadow palettes, as I think that's really interesting to see, because some people might only have 2 eyeshadow palettes that I have, and therefore, you know, which one would you prefer out of those 2? But say you had quite a few that I have, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, to see how they differ from mine. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in my next one.